I'll
Okay,
introduce myself.
okay, no problem.
And I'm from the San Diego church. And when I retired from teaching in public school system, I immediately joined the Peace Corps and went to China for 2 years. And that was in 2010, 2012. And came home and decided to try out a lifestyle without a car on purpose, intentionally in San Diego to see how long I could survive on public transit. Because in China, I wasn't allowed to drive. And so I did that. And then, you know, I had to go, I got the itch and I had to go abroad again. So I joined Brethren Volunteer Service. And Jeremiah, could you just put us all, I don't want to be spotlighted. I just think it's fun to be one of the group. Is that okay?
No problem.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, Brethren Volunteer Service had the orientation in August of 2018. And I was the oldest in my unit of BVS. There were a couple of volunteers there who were old like me, but basically the 16 who were in my unit were considerably younger. The youngest was 18. And at the time I was 70 something, I don't know, anyway, old. And I think the hardest part of BVS, okay, I'd like to know how many of you have served in BVS. Anybody? Put your thumb up, or yeah, okay. I don't know what orientation was like for you, but this was at Camp Colorado. And since they closed New Windsor, they have the trainings in various Brethren camps. And it's a very high elevation. So you definitely felt that. But for me, the most challenging part of orientation had to do with the cooking and preparing food for each other. We were in small groups of 3 or 4, and we had to plan it, shop for it, and then prepare it on $1 per person per meal. It was a real challenge. But it was probably a good exercise for all of us, preparing us, because in BVS you don't know what you're going to encounter. I knew I was going to Nigeria because I wanted to teach, and you know, I've got the teaching in my blood. So I chose Nigeria because it was the only place internationally really that had anything to do with teaching. But it wasn't clear what I would be teaching. I could tutor, Bethany has a new tech center in Jos. So Jeremiah, can you fix it so it's gallery for all of us or not?
Yes. Everybody gets to choose their own view.
Oh, I get you. Okay, I'm going to choose gallery. I want to see everybody. There we go. Thanks. I'm happy now. When I first went over there, I just figured I was going to be preparing prospective graduate students who wanted to be part of the Bethany program in Jos, Nigeria. But I kept getting these emails from Carol Smith who wanted me to go to Gorku, which is an IDP camp, internally displaced people who were coming from the extreme northeast, where the Boko Haram had been wreaking damage to their lives. And it was an interfaith IDP camp just 20 kilometers outside of Abuja, the capital. And she wanted me to go there to help prepare for the opening of the Montessori preschool for peace that was just about to happen. This was end of August, early September. And I don't know anything about early childhood education. I have very little experience with young children, but I finally agreed if the EYN people wanted me to do it, I would go. So I did, and I'm really glad. It was like really getting your feet wet in the outback, because it was truly the outback. You know, you had power sometimes. There wasn't much internet. I had no place I could buy food. So, you know, I really had to depend upon others. But I'm really glad I had those. It was really only 15 days there. From there, I was driven north to Jos, which is an amazing city on a high plateau in north central Nigeria, where Hillcrest School is located. During the first half of my service, I was tutoring prospective graduate students, teaching French, a little German, and volunteering wherever I could in whatever way I could. So I would like to start by showing you my slides. I suppose many of you know where Nigeria is, but you might not know that 1/5 of all Africans are Nigerian. It's the most populous of all African nations. So it's a very significant place. Let's see. I lived in Unity House, which was built by Americans in 2013 for disaster relief workers, groups that would come, say, from the States for a couple of weeks. The girl in purple, Blessing, was one of the students I tutored. Her family was directly affected by the Boko Haram, and so she had been brought to Jos for refuge. And she was a very bright young woman, and we had very interesting tutoring sessions. I lived on the Church of the Brethren EYN compound at Boulder Hill, right there in the middle of Jos. This is what Unity House looks like. The woman on the right, Rebecca, was my house cleaner. She did the laundry, some cooking, some shopping. And I really depended upon Rebecca for much. You know, there was no washing machine, and I don't know that I could have handled the laundry on my own. And the young man there is one of the security staff there. It was suggested that I would want to take all precautions against malaria. So I brought my own pop-up net with me in the bottom of my suitcase. This thing folds up. And it was great because there were no hooks on the ceiling. I knew that in advance. And I knew that I would need my own, to figure out my own way to be protected. So Rebecca is a farmer, just like all the women there. You know, like all around the house was her farm. We might call it a garden. She called it a farm. She grew okra and squash. This was a typical, after a typical visit to the market where she was shopping for me. And in the blue colander, you see chicken. She would always buy a live chicken. And then there's a man in the market that prepares it, cuts it up, and so forth. Now, since this group is not really very big, you can unmute yourself and ask me questions whenever you want. I'd be happy to answer. I was very fortunate to have an actual stove with an oven and everything. And this was the cooking gas. And sometimes it could run out right in the middle of a cooking lunch or something. So, you know, I finally found a guy that I could call, and he, of course I had no car. right? So he would come and get it, take it, refill it, and bring it back within the space of about 2 hours, which was amazing. And since power was intermittent, if people could afford it, they had a generator. Now, my problem was I couldn't start it. It was very difficult to start. You had to pull this long thing like you do on some lawnmowers. So sometimes I had to get the security people there to start it. And I had to pay for the fuel that went into it. So I had free lodgings, but there were these other, I paid for the cooking gas and such. Now, I think this was right before Thanksgiving or Christmas. I was visiting the pastor in his home, and I happened to mention that, I needed a chicken. And so there was a woman there visiting, and she said, I'll go get you one. So she sold me this chicken. And of course, that's the way you buy your chicken, pretty much. And then almost any Nigerian man worth his salt knows how to get that chicken kitchen ready. So this was the outdoor kitchen of the Women's Fellowship at the local church. And they were using it for slaughter. This was Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. And when they do this on the grounds there, usually there's several families who are going to take the meat. Tuwo is a typical dish of that region, and the white stuff is kind of a starchy stuff that you can pull off a pinch of it with your fingers, and then you dip it in the stew. That thing is called a stew. It's lots of green vegetables. Tuwo can be made out of different things. So I bake as a hobby. So I was making hot cross buns around Easter time, and I invited a couple of my young friends over to learn how to bake from me. Baking is really not a part of Nigerian culture. These are 3 of the 5 children of Rebecca, the house cleaner, and they're all in school, and she had great difficulty earning enough money to pay the school fees. It's a real challenge. So at some point I helped them out. Our young neighbor was in a terrible car accident and ended up in the hospital. And it's a big hospital called University of Jos Teaching Hospital. And we went out to visit, and this was the ward where he had a lot of head injuries. You do not want to be in a Nigerian hospital. This is one reason why I came home when COVID hit in March, because there's very little available there. Like, if you have a family member in the hospital, you take everything. You take the bed linens, you take any clothes they might need, you take hot water, you take food. The hospital provides almost nothing. And when they needed to take him for an x-ray, they took him down a couple flights of stairs, and when they got down there, the person who you pay for the x-rays was not around, so they had to wait hours and hours. And just, the thought of having to go through that, crazy. So here's the young man who was injured, and here he is after he got better. Nathaniel is a law student, his father is the vice president of the EYN. So at the gate of the compound where I lived, There was a tiny little convenience store and that had a kitten. And so these kids are running around there. If any of you know any of the people in Nigeria, feel free to chime in and ask questions and such. The man on the left, Marcus Gamache, was my minder, my handler. And he's been in the States a number of times. He has come to California. Some of you may have met Marcus. And part of his job with the EYN was taking care of the foreigners. So, you know, he was in charge of getting my visa renewed and stuff like that. And the young woman was traveling through. She is half German, half Ghanaian. And she works for an NGO where they're helping people start up their own businesses with textiles. And she was just traveling through. So she stayed at our house because it's kind of like a guest house. This was in the Mennonite Central Committee office in Jos. The Mennonites have their own ministries going there. The pastor's son was doing his national service. When you get your college degree, your university degree in Nigeria, you have to spend a year afterwards giving service to the nation. And he was a teacher at this school for a few months. And so I insisted that he take me because I wanted to be inside and interact with the schools of all kinds while I was there. This school was a public school, but there were still fees. It was also interfaith with predominantly Muslim. And I was just playing games with these children to kind of interact and get acquainted. And this is what the school looked like in the inner courtyard. Right there behind me is a KK. A KK is simple vehicle used like a taxi around town. I rode in them frequently. They cost 50 naira, which is 14 cents. Another school that I volunteered in was the Brethren Academy of Jos, BAJ. And there you can see what the uniform looks like. It's right on the same compound where I lived, between the church and my house. These children ranged in age from 7 to 13, and the boy in the back was a really big kid. The way they organize their primary schools is kind of like once you've learned the material, you can move on. So it's not like first grade, second grade, third grade. It's primary 1 will have an age range and primary 2 will have an age range. So I was teaching these children French because that's what I could do. And they did not have a French teacher and that's what they wanted. This is back at the first school you saw, the public school. Much poorer, fewer resources, but adorable children. Okay, now this is a really good high school I visited called TCNN, is Theological College of Northern Nigeria, which was started by a group of 6 Protestant churches, including the Brethren. And they have their own school attached to this seminary. And so I wanted to meet those people. I was taken over there and I asked this woman who was the English teacher, I said, would you let me teach in your room for a few minutes? And she said, if I would watch her teach, then I could teach. So we exchanged teaching. She was marvelous. So and there were like 50 children in the room. This is in the, back in the EYN compound. These women are all in the Women's Fellowship and they're going to prepare food for a large group. The woman on the left is Marcus Gamache's wife, Janada, and she, of course, speaks excellent English. The other women are barely literate. I taught adult literacy, and they were in the group, and they were amazing. You know, they're women who never really ever went to school when they were young. And I asked him, I said, well, why didn't you learn how to read when you were little and stuff like that? And they all came from the villages and they said, you know, I'd go to school and every time I didn't know an answer, they would just beat me. So I quit going. And of course, if the family had limited funds, educating the boys was considered more important. Okay, so here is outside the EYN church on the compound. This is the big weekly women's fellowship meeting, and they are having a demonstration on how to make their own shampoo so they could start their own business if they wanted, small business. So the church there had micro loans for people who wanted to get started in their own business. This is the love feast and feet washing. And you see, I have my head covering because every woman, when you go to worship, has to have their head covered. And of course, here I'm wearing pants, but I rarely did. Okay, so now this is the other half of my BVS experience, the other side. This is a Hillcrest School, which was built 75 years ago by Americans. Many Church of the Brethren have to do with the founding of this school. It's a beautiful school, and they needed an English teacher beginning in August of 2019, and I said, I think I can do it. So they hired me. I wasn't actually hired, you know, I was a volunteer. I was a BVS volunteer. And here's at the Hillcrest School, security men, and the woman on the left is Sharon Flatten, who is currently still living in Unity House. After I had been in Unity House for 6 months alone, she arrived, and she's a Bethany student, a graduate student, but she also works kind of a little bit like a recruiter for Bethany to try to help them grow their program there. Mail was very important to me. I was always sending letters and praying that I would get letters, but Nigeria Post doesn't really function. So that's like a whole other story. But I would try, and this is very expensive. This letter cost like $1.30 or something to send. And so your average Nigerian was not going to use the postal service. So if you really wanted to be sure that a letter or money or anything was delivered in Nigeria, it was always hand carried. So at the Hillcrest School, they were having, the 8th graders were having a pancake breakfast. And this is one of the parents. And the parents are all busy making this pancake breakfasts happen. And here is Mary was one of my colleagues, but also a parent at the school. So she taught English to 9th graders, and I taught English to the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And she's been in Nigeria over 20 years. She came and stayed and married a Nigerian and has 3 wonderful children. And one of them is a student in Santa Barbara right now. It's exciting. So they had an art show for the little children at Hillcrest. And I love this flame tree. This is right on the campus, just gorgeous. This boy was my student. He was a senior last year, and he was the top student in the senior class. It's a small school, so there were only 19 seniors. And he was planning to study at Worcester in the state of Ohio, but of course, all that stuff is on hold right now. But just the sweetest and brightest kid. We had to get together with the expats and then the people who lived on the school compound there every Thursday night for supper. And I think this might have been Thanksgiving. And it was almost always out of doors, and it was always a potluck. The man there is from Canada. He is the principal at the elementary school. So they had 3 principals there, elementary, middle, and high school. And his children were some of the very few white kids at the school. And this really knocked my socks off. They performed the Messiah at Christmas last year. And this group is a community chorus. And they've been performing the Messiah there like every year for, I don't know, 50 years. It's just amazing. Here we had a run. It was a big event to raise money for charity. And people came and walked and ran. It was a 6-hour solid time where you and your team had to be on the move for 6 hours. So obviously I was one of the slow ones, but it was great fun. This Church of the Brethren, EYN, is located out on the outskirts of Jos. So it's considered kind of like a mission church, but they are autonomous. You know, they no longer are totally dependent on the mother church, which would be the church in Jos. So we went there one Sunday, and Sharon gave the sermon. And of course she was scared, very nervous. And the man on the right was interpreting for her. And of course she practiced that sermon many times with me. And these women are in the Sisters Fellowship. So you have the Women's Fellowship and you have the Sisters Fellowship. And the difference is the sisters like to sing in English. So Sharon joined the Sisters Fellowship, but when they were actually conducting their meetings, it was always in Hausa. I found this in a newspaper, and it just confirmed for me, this man was a village chief, and he had 3 wives. These are at least 3 of his wives, and he was a Christian. So, you know, this is where I had confirmed in my mind it wasn't just Muslims who were polygamists, but also Christians. This guy is in the Anglican Church. So that dates back to the British time there. Nearby Hillcrest, there was a large translation center where they were translating the Bible into various languages. Where you go, I will go, your people. Isn't that from Esther? I think. And anyway, I had a tour there and I wanted to see what their work actually looked like.
It's Ruth, I think.
Ruth, oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so maybe that's the end. Okay, that's my last one. So please, I hope you have lots of questions and feel free to ask me anything about either BVS or Nigeria. Okay, Karen, unmute yourself.
You had a picture of vegetables at the very beginning of your slideshow, and there were some things there that were not familiar to me, and I was wondering if you could tell me what they were.
Oh, okay, well, what's amazing about Joss is that the diversity of vegetables and fruit. It's truly amazing because, you know, there's certain things that all the Nigerians eat all the time, like carrots, potatoes, tomatoes. But then, you know, we foreigners, we like everything. We like our broccoli and cauliflower and leeks and bok choy and everything. They had it all. It was amazing. There was a special vegetable market for the foreigners or the people who had lived abroad, you know, and I could find just about anything. I think the only thing I couldn't find readily was mushrooms. And I finally found mushrooms too.
Well, there was something there that was green and white, and it looked the shape of a carrot.
Okay, let me go back. I'm going to go, but we're going to go look at it.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, so the one on the lower left is a cucumber.
Uh-huh.
And
Next.
then there's some peas.
Oh, that's peas. Okay, in the picture it.
Those are peas in the pod.
Okay.
Okay, so on the right-hand side, you
No.
see peas in a thing that looks like a cone.
Yes, the cone.
That they just package them that way. Isn't that funny?
And that's peas too?
Those are ordinary peas. And then the ones on the left, I guess, might be green beans. I can't tell.
Okay, thank you.
And then lots of cabbage. They're very big on slaw.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to unshare again. Okay.
Was
And
that starchy thing you talked about, was that fufu? Because I've heard of an African starchy food called fufu.
correct, that is a regional term. So in where I was living, they call it tuo. And then it's called fufu in other places, and it's made out of semolina or different things. But I was not eating with my fingers because I wasn't like, you know, living with Nigerians. And I was always offered utensils, so, but that's how they might typically eat it, is with their fingers. Yes.
I have two questions. Well, I probably have more than that. Number one, what was your teaching experience before you retired? And number two, why should someone consider doing BVS in retirement?
Okay, so I was a high school French and German teacher, but I had also taught ESL a bit. And in the Peace Corps in China, I taught English for a couple of years. And, you know, so I figured, you know, low level English. It wasn't like I was an expert on English literature or something, but the need there in Joss was more linguistic than literary. So the people I was tutoring were older prospective graduate students, like people in their 40s and even 50s who knew English, but not that well, you know, so they needed help with, you know, editing and, you know, making it sound better. And then also there's the cultural literacy aspect. So typically for a lesson, I would bring up a New York Times article and we would analyze it together. Because once you do that, you've got a real introduction to American culture. I mean, the kind of issues that are important here. I wasn't trying to convert them to American culture or anything, but if they were going to study abroad, some were going abroad, or if they were going to study even at Bethany, they needed to have a certain level of cultural literacy. Now, the other question you had was about why BVS and retirement. Well, my first impulse, you know, when I retired was to join the Peace Corps. And I'm very glad I did. And at that time, the Peace Corps would send you where they wanted to. You didn't have any choice. But then Peace Corps changed to more try to meet your wishes as to where you want to go, what you want to do. But after Peace Corps, then I had this opportunity. I had heard about Hillcrest School for a long time. I had always wanted to go to Africa as a teacher. It's something that was deep in my heart. My Aunt Mary Smeltzer taught in Botswana in the Peace Corps in her 60s. And I thought, oh, if Aunt Mary can do it, I can do it, you know. But I was a little bit hesitant because Africa is such an extreme climate. You have the tropical climate, you know, could I really survive that? And I was so lucky. I mean, Jos is described as a San Diego climate. And it is, you know, it just was not that extreme. Plus the mosquitoes were not really an issue. Some of the older folks, retirees who join Peace Corps, do for a shorter period, like 6 months or 1 year. But 2 years was fine with me because I was going to another culture and I knew it takes at least 1 year to get into that culture. And then you can do more the second year. I don't know if I really answered your question.
Well, I suspect that, I mean, I have my own reasons why I might consider it. Mostly to become engulfed and immersed into another culture for a period of time.
It's
that
so
would be my.
I mean, it is so valuable. You know, I feel I had always wanted to spend time in Africa. And what you learn about the culture and the people is just so rich that, you know, there's no other way to do it except to go there and live there and work there.
Right.
You know, some of the
I
other.
just retired.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, my husband and I just retired in May with the thinking of traveling. I would tell people I want to set foot on every continent. Well, obviously that's not happening right now. So
Right.
Here I sit.
Well, if it ever opens up again, I really recommend Peace Corps as well, because while I was in the Peace Corps, I went in at the age of 62, turned and started my Medicare while I was still in China. Is that what can I say? 2 years does not seem that long when you're in your 60s or 70s. For a 22-year-old, it's an eternity, you know. And a lot of them don't make it in the Peace Corps. They serve for a year and then they say, oh, I'm bored, I'm going home, or whatever, you know, that ridiculous stuff. But Peace Corps has another program called Peace Corps Response, which is definitely targets people who've had experience in life, whatever your career has been. You can, and they're very specific assignments. Like they want somebody to go to the Philippines who has experience with disaster recovery for 10 months. This is very specific, and it's not that long. It's only 10 months. There were a lot of married couples in the Peace Corps. There was a couple in China who were retirees, and they loved it so much in China. They were staying for a third year. And they told me when, obviously we became close friends because we were about the same age. They told me when they were done, they said, we're not going to go home and stay home for a good 10 years. We're going to go and volunteer and work. And so they almost immediately went to Jamaica for 2 years in the Peace Corps. So the Brethren Volunteer Service has a few international opportunities, and in some of them you have to know Spanish, and my Spanish isn't that good, so I couldn't go there. And they've got people in Ireland. But anyway, I encourage you because you've got each other and you go there together and work together. Hopefully one of these months or years, these opportunities will be open to us again.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is Karen. I was in BVS in Ecuador as a young person, and it does take a chunk out of your early career, but I would think the opportunity, I wouldn't be slowed down by not knowing the language, because that's one way to do it. It's the value of a 2-year commitment is that you learn and have a chance to serve as well. But I really recommend the experience, and it is interesting thinking about going as a retired person. And it is nice, depending on where you are in a transition, to think about having health insurance provided if you aren't yet to Medicare age. So,
Right.
thanks, Judy, for your
mean,
sharing. That was interesting. Yes.
Well, you know, I never got sick at all when I was in Africa. But I tend to just be a really healthy person. And like I say, the mosquitoes weren't interested in me. And so I was lucky. But most of the people I knew there, young and old, had malaria. They had contracted it once, and you never really lose it. So, and you usually get typhoid too. So if your immune system was compromised for any reason, you might come down with that for a little while, and then you're out of commission, then you come back. So they have good treatments now for malaria. So it's not such a serious thing. But like I say, the mosquitoes weren't even interested in me. So I was so ready for the mosquitoes. I have my net. I bought all these clothes that were a special brand where the fabric was treated for insects. I had every kind of repellent you could have. I had it all. And they weren't interested in me, period. But my housemate got eaten alive.
She told me about that, Judy. I'm glad to hear you share. I've known Sharon Flotten since she was in middle school, way back. And I just wanted to let the others know something that I did with our junior high Sunday school class here in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, was to have a Zoom call with Sharon and have her talk a little bit about some of the things that happened there, because we do all of our junior high classes by Zoom. And so that was a neat kind of experience to have. And she shared about Hillcrest School, and she shared about some of the other connections she has. And then she and I, after that, she wrote me, sent me a text message or a message and said, through Facebook, and said, could we talk sometime? So we had about an hour and a half conversation, and she told me some about you and how much life, how interesting life was to be able to share, and how different it was when you weren't there anymore. So I know that you were a very important person to her, and was glad for that. I had a question for you. Don Shankster, who's on this call, and I were roommates together at Hillcrest on that Boulder Hill campus when it was first built. The very first semester it was open, I was there. I think you were there the next year, Don. We were in that building just across from the church that then became the EYN headquarters when they had to leave Korhi because of Boko Haram. So my question is, how is that building being used now? That's something just be interesting for Don and me,
So
perhaps. But I'm
I
just
believe
curious.
Sharon told me that her parents were house parents there in that building. Is that possible?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, and then, I mean, it's had so many different uses. And then there was this fellow called Dele who made it into an internet shop, like, you know, an internet cafe for a while. He ran a kind of a small business out of it that probably had nothing to do really with the church, but he is a teacher and a computer expert at Hillcrest. So currently it's not being used for much. It's an office, but you know, I think it's called something like the compliance office, and I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, I know that's the office that makes sure that everybody is getting their proper certifications. They do their professional growth as pastors and that sort of thing. Yeah.
And let's see. And then, you know, what's the name of the really famous woman in the EYN? Rebecca Dolly.
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
And she's-
the Dolly husband and wife, their daughter was a secretary in that office for a while. And I was tutoring her because she was trying to get into Bethany. And, but in the end, in the final analysis, I think she got married instead.
The other thing I wanted to say was that Marcus also did a session with our junior high class. Now, Marcus tends to preach a little when he gets involved, but you know, I've known Marcus a long time. He was with me both in 2001 and 2008, 2016 when I was able to go back to visit, and he's been in our home and stayed with us too. But so it was really neat to have him on, but I'm afraid they didn't get a chance to interact with him as much, but they did with Sharon. So if anybody else is interested in that, I think they probably would be helpful that way too.
Well, if your junior high kids want to interact with me about Nigeria or China or Germany, I've taught in Germany. So any of those places, you have my contact information there?
Not sure I do, but
Let me put it in the chat.
okay, great.
I'll put it for everybody. So then if you have more questions, you can, let's see, you can email me with any question you like. I'll just put, so I'll put my email. So it's Frau Madame, Frau because I was a German teacher, Madame because I was a French teacher. And believe it or not, there were people in Joss who wanted to learn German from me. It was amazing, just amazing. I mean, you would expect French because they're surrounded by Francophone nations. So that was always fun. But at Hillcrest, they asked me to be a real high school English teacher. And I had to teach a whole menu of things I've never taught in my life and have no background in. I had to teach British literature, American literature, advanced placement English composition and literature, and world literature. And it was amazing. Somehow I was able to do that. But that was what should I say, at Hillcrest, many people were being asked to do things they had never done before, or they weren't actually prepared for. Like the man in the classroom next to me was teaching Bible. And even though he knows the Bible extremely well, and he's been a missionary for 13 years, he had never taught Bible to high school kids. So he was scared. And, he would come over to me and I would give him all these classroom tips because I'm the experienced teacher. But what a fabulous school to teach in. I mean, it was like teaching in heaven. The colleagues were caring and loving. The students, I just, after having taught in an American high school and then going there, like I say, it was like teaching in heaven.
Judy, I was wondering, you said that there were hardly any white kids there. Was it not as much international? Because when I was in the early 80s and I taught there, and it was quite the international mix. Is it not as much that?
No. So what's happened, of course, the missionaries kind of all left. And so there's just a handful of white kids. Now, some of the families are mixed, like say Lebanese and Nigerian, that kind of international. I think the whole school enrollment was 220, and that's K through 12. So it's not a large school. The teaching staff was possibly 20% white. So an increasing number of the teachers are Nigerian, which is great. And it's the way it should be. And what did you teach there, Amy?
I was music. I just graduated from Manchester and off I went I ended up for 3 years over there. Yeah.
So there's a great need there for teachers. They really need a music teacher. They really need an art teacher. Well, the year I taught, the art teacher died like the first month of school. So you might even have known her because she was there many years. And it's just really, really sad. She was not that old. And she had 3 children in the school. She had one in second grade, one in middle school, one in high school. And she just died overnight from low blood pressure or some weird thing. And the whole school was in mourning for a really long time. So if any of you know of anybody who's looking for a teaching opportunity, they're always in need of teachers over there. And I just can't imagine a better place to teach. They invite you to live on the compound. Now, I did not choose to live on the compound because I already had my home in Boulder Hill. And they just take really good care of you. So, yeah. So encourage people. So Amy, how did you find out about that job and why did you go there?
I was just graduating my senior year at Manchester, and Merv Keeney approached me and said, I'd known him as a kid. I grew up in York, Jim, so not so far. So I'd known Merv a long time, and he said, well, what are you doing? I thought, I might travel a year. I didn't know. And there was a position in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and the more he talked about it, the more it wasn't me. And then he mentioned this one at Hillcrest. And so I went, and I met the person I was going to be with, because we alternated. We lived on the compound, on the school compound, and on the well, I don't know if it is still the 5th grade, the back part where the football pitch was.
Yes, right.
Anyway, I lived there, and but go ahead.
Their internet and their computer labs are state of the art. I mean, I was using Google Classroom, which I had never learned how to use. I mean, I learned all these things there. I was doing the grades online. And of course, after the COVID, they wanted me to continue teaching just one class. which I did. I continued with my AP students. But the problem, of course, is that even though they have good internet, it was from their homes, and their internet was not enough. You know, they could send me stuff and receive stuff, but it's not like they could hang out for an hour on the internet, like for a lecture or a Zoom. Yeah. So a couple of you have personal connection to Hillcrest and to Joss. So maybe we have time for one or two more questions.
I was going to check, the Shanksters, you're part of Owen and Celia, I'm guessing, yes. We did visit them, and I think we stayed at their house, actually. That was good people, you're from good stock, and I do appreciate that.
Were they living in Nigeria?
In Garkita.
Yes, yes, they
Garkita.
were in Waka for many years and then moved to Garkita. And I didn't know if you knew any of my siblings, like Susan or Janice or Carl. So they've been at Hillcrest too. So
So the principal of the high school was from the Congo, and he was 65 and going strong. And the middle school principal was from Ireland. And then the Canadian ran the elementary school. So it was really a mixed blessing there. And just so much about the school is really American. I mean, they use California textbooks.
I got to use the old Silver Burdette music books.
We did correspondence courses before Hillcrest was official as a high school, but I forget where they got sent to.
Yeah.
What about danger, violence, the protection of the guardies?
You know, most of the worst stuff, the Boko Haram, is all further to the northeast. So I would say that the danger and violence that exists in Joss is just petty crime. And, you know, like I was told, don't be out at night, period. So I never was. I never went anywhere at night. And of course, I didn't have a car, but if I happened to be somewhere at night, I would be driven home by some expats in their cars. You know, so, but the crime, it was like people's homes were broken into. It wasn't like terrorist threats, or they weren't targeting foreigners.
Kind of
Well,
like in San Diego, huh?
I mean, they would target people who have money. So obviously I did not display any money, and I never wore jewelry. I didn't drive a car, you know.
One thing about, plus you have gray hair, which is actually an honored position in culture, in their culture. And so I would think that you would, well, hopefully you would be very safe, but that is quite an honored position. At least I hope it still is in the family.
It helps. I think it helps a little. Yeah. Well, I think our time is up. So if you have further questions, please email me. You've got it there. And I want to thank you all for coming.
Thank you for sharing your story.
It's good to
Bye-bye.
see all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Judy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Karen.
Goodbye.
See you later.